Hello, friends. This is Dave Hurwitz, executive editor at ClassicsToday.com, here with a little chat about humor, that most dangerous quality, and why there's so little in the world of classical music. And I'm not going to go into some sort of sociological, psycho-social analysis of the reasons. We all know the reasons, right? People want to take themselves seriously. They validate themselves based on their artistic tastes. They're desperately afraid that others will be looking down on them or mocking them, or it's all of that insecurity and stuff. So yes, that's there. That's why there's so little humor. But I wanted to tell you just a couple stories about where humor has gotten me in a certain amount of trouble. And all of us, because people just can't deal with it. They just don't deal with it. And it's really fascinating. I have three little tales from the universe of classical music, which shows very, very, I think, marvelously the inability of the classical music universe to appreciate some really, I think, pretty damn good humor when they find it or even understand that it's going on. The first example actually is a video which you can watch. It's in the Tinnitus Classics playlist, and I put it below. I was a member of the American Musicological Society for many years, and they were wonderful people. They really were, and they welcomed me. I mean, only a pseudo scholar, a independent scholar, as we say in the biz, because I didn't have an academic affiliation, but I really wanted to do serious research and into things like vibrato and performance practice, and also historical things, real interesting bits of history. And one of the things I noticed about the American Musicological Society lectures and the meetings was that they presented a lot of papers where people talk about music, but we hardly ever got to listen to any. And since I have this record collection, it was a good opportunity to just play music and talk about it. So they were wonderful about it. They really were, and I love them dearly. But they did a seminar. These things usually took place on Saturdays, and they ran from 9 or 10 in the morning till 4 to 5 in the afternoon, with anywhere from 4 or 5 to half a dozen or more papers being presented. And the topic was music and philosophy. And I said, oh God, that's going to be a long day. As indeed it was. And so I figured I really needed to do something to sort of lighten up the proceedings. And so I trumped up a paper. The paper was on Daniel Aubert, the French, composer of grand operas and opera comique and things like that. His ballet version of Immanuel Kant's The Critique of Pure Reason. It was La Critique de la Raison Pure ou Les Choses en Soi. The Critique of Pure Reason, or The Thing in Itself. And I did a whole fake research paper, and you, like I said, you can see a link to the presentation below because I thought it was pretty good. And I did it. I did it in the middle of this whole long day on music and philosophy. And the fascinating thing about it was that nobody got it. One person did. The one person who did actually there were two people who did, I have to say, but the one person who really got it was the president of the American Musicological Society at the time. He was doing the PowerPoint presentation. And as he was reading it, I could see that he was quivering and with mirth. And with the stuff that I was sticking up there for these people to look at. I did everything I could to suggest that maybe there was no ballet by Aubert based on Immanuel Kant's The Critique of Pure Reason, but it was done in a very serious academic context. And if you want to watch the video, you can. And the bottom line is there was a Q&A afterwards, because the way it worked is you had 20 minutes to present your paper, and then there was a 10-minute question and answer. And the questions, had I spoken to Herr Brautschleimer at the Kant Stiftung, and what about Mademoiselle Crevette Monnier, who was the Scribe scholar? It was unreal. And of course, I did it as seriously as I possibly could. And it was only afterwards where I finally told them, because people came up to me afterwards and asked me about sources and things like that. I said, it's not real. And they just went, oh, it's not? And it just goes to show that in certain environments, I mean, this was one of those wonderful examples, how in certain environments, you must take it seriously. Because in the world of academia, particularly, God knows 90% of what's happening is complete bullshit and rubbish and totally worthless. I mean, it may be interesting, to hear about once or something, but people make careers on this stuff. And the concept going into these things, these symposia, and I went to several international ones, actually, is that no matter how stupid the topic or how ridiculous or how insignificant or trivial it may be, everybody has to be treated the same. Everything is equally wonderful. Everything is equally valid. Everything deserves equal consideration and equal time. That's not a bad thing. I mean, it's an openness in the academic world. Necessarily, it's not a bad thing, unless it's taken to ridiculous extremes, which I was able to demonstrate it certainly can be. So that was just one example of how humor just slides over some of these folk, especially when they're considering these things in terms of their own professional legitimacy. And people who watch this stuff, are attracted to classical music, also have their own version of that legitimization effect and that inability as a result to experience humor, to get it when their leg is being pulled a little bit. But there are a couple other examples that were really fun, which you can have a look at. One of them was a chat room event. I mean, I don't need to tell you about chat room events, right? When I first started classicstoday.com, I was very excited that we were starting this magazine and it was free and people could come and look at it and we were doing reviews. And I thought people would like that. I really did. Stupid me. I went to Rec Music Classical Recordings. Remember those people? Some of you will remember those people. And I mean, I was totally unprepared for the level of hatred and viciousness and vituperation that would meet or greet anybody who allegedly proposed to invite others to view their work. It was wow, baby. But there were some really, really funny threads as a result of that. And one of them involved fans. Now, you know how I feel about fans and cults and things like that, right? I mean, it's all just nuts. But I wrote a review of the Barbaroli Sibelius cycle, the reissue on EMI of the Barbaroli Sibelius cycle with the Halle Orchestra. Now, Barbaroli was a wonderful Sibelius conductor. We all know that. And he did some great things. But that particular cycle, which I know some of you love, is a mess. It's just a mess. I mean, it was at the end of his life. He was ill. It's terribly slow. The playing is sometimes just incredibly sloppy. The orchestra, it was never a great one. They're really second rate. And so, you got to pick and choose. And I thought I was being nice when I said the following. Okay, here it is. Listening to Barbaroli's Halle Orchestra recording is like trying to live with a badly house-trained English bulldog. While always full of warmth, enthusiasm, and affection, you have to put up with a lot of drooling and slobbering, and once in a while you find a big mess on your living room floor. So it is with this much-anticipated Sibelius cycle reissue. And then I go down and really, describe it in very serious detail. I mean, why I feel that way. And I thought that was a pretty good analogy, a light, humorous analogy that nobody would have a problem with. Well, there was a Barbaroli fanatic who was in, that particular chat room, and he went completely nuts. I mean, I was afraid he was going to hurt himself. That kind of nuts. He said that I compared Barbaroli's conducting to dog shit. Well, that wasn't really what I said, was it? I mean, I was making the comparison, yes, but I mean, I didn't say those words. And that wasn't the idea. The idea was to describe the ambiance of a Barbaroli performance in general, because that's what he was like. He was a big, warm, affectionate, there was all that good stuff. And then there was the debit side of some of that gushing affection, which was a certain, sometimes carelessness. And it happened, and you forgave it because of the, warmth and affection. I mean, that was my point. That was my point. But no, this guy started out with this. He compared him to dog shit. I can't believe it. He's like, he was, suicidal over this whole thing. And I just was looking at this harangue that went on. It went on and on and on and on and on for, people responding, saying, relax, don't kill yourself, don't bust a gut. It was alarming. It was truly alarming that anybody could take themselves and that seriously, that they could be close to doing physical harm, either to me or themselves or their pet. I don't know what was going on. It was nuts, absolutely nuts. And there's nothing you can really do about that, because I cannot not be humorous. I can't help it. It's there, and it's going to come out no matter what happens. So there was that. And then even more entertaining was the fabulous, and I have to find this, give me a second, the fabulous John Taverner review that was written by my dear and dear departed late partner, David Vernier, when we were doing ClassicsToday.com. Now, this has a bit of a history. Some of you will remember back in the 70s and 80s, and even into the 90s, there were distributors who handled imports from independent labels, because in those days, we didn't have the kind of international distribution that we have now, and it was very, very difficult to find certain things, and so these distributors popped up, and there were some big ones. I mean, Harmonia Mundi was one of the most famous. There was Albany, there was Qualiton, which did Hungariton and Supraphon in Eastern Europe, and there was Allegro, and Allegro had a lot of very good labels initially, and they were very forward in terms of their PR, which was a good thing. And every April 1st, they would circulate a release sheet of new releases. That was their April Fool's edition. And they had some wonderful, wonderful things. Very, very funny stuff. And we would all enjoy it, and it was fun. So when we started up ClassicsToday.com, we decided we would do some of our own April Fool's reviews, which I know some of you have seen. And they really have been quite popular when we run them. And we do every other April or so. We toss up a few of them. One of them was my Deutsche Grammophon recording of Boulez and the Ensemble Intercontemporain doing Xenakis 4 last downloads. That particular disc, I still get inquiries about, asking people where they can find it and why DG left it out of the complete Boulez box. And okay. When you read the thing, you just go, okay, yeah, sure. So you can look that up if you want over at ClassicsToday.com. But one of the very best was a piece by John Taverner called God. And it was written by my partner, David Vernier, who was just wonderful, had a wonderful, dry sense of humor. And he thought Taverner was as vile a composer as I did. So we had no problem coming up with this. Anyway, I want to read this review to you just for fun, because it's just amazing. Here it is. Taverner's God. He writes as follows, and it's on Chandos, and we mocked up a cover and everything. You can see it there. You already can hear the British press crying masterpiece over John Taverner's latest work, the first part of which has just been released by Chandos Records. All the fuss, including 2-page 4-color advertising spreads in all the British magazines, which, according to the label, are, quote, the only ones with any influence in the world, unquote, is about Taverner's monumental transforming trilogy, God, Theos in Greek. Part 1, The Mind of God, is the subject of this new recording, a marvelous and stupefying work for unknown countertenor, celebrity countertenor chorus, and untunable organ. The trilogy's other two parts, The Eyes of God, for full-bore crumhorns and rooftop saxophone choir, and The Meaning of God, featuring anonymous readings from ancient Greek scrolls set to music performed on specially milled Euphrates reeds, will be recorded, quote, in the fullness of time, unquote. For now, we have what amounts to a massive 4-hour-long piece that essentially is a set of plain chant-sounding intonations, 77 in all. In each, a solo melody, consisting primarily of a single note in F sharp above middle C to be exact, is sung by a countertenor who, either from sheer fatigue or by means of some notational direction, adds an occasional squawking embellishment. The texts are completely undecipherable. Taverner apparently dictated them from sounds spoken in his ear, quote, in a vision, unquote. Underneath all of this is an incessant drone, here sung by what could only be called the greatest congregation of superstar countertenors ever assembled, identified for this occasion as the Clerks of Canterbury Countertenor Choir and Cantors of the Cotswolds. There's a sound clip. They're all here, from Andreas Scholl and Ruben Blades to David Daniels and Daniel Taylor. 41 countertenors in all, many culled from the ranks of the finest British and continental European early music ensembles. There's even a guy who sounds exactly like Alfred Deller. But solo billing goes to 87-year-old Welsh countertenor Minas Tirith, who is literally making his singing debut with this recording. Taverner specifically chose Tirith, whom he discovered humming to himself in the loft of a West Country church 6 months prior to the recording session, because he found the voice's, quote, indeterminacy of pitch and unclassifiable tone color perfectly suited to represent God, a voice never before heard, unquote. The sparse accompaniment consists only of organ, but the composer is very clear to designate in the score that it must be untunable. No explanation is given. Although countless parish churches offer such instruments for the recording project, we've all got one of those, was the general comment. The one selected came from a 13th century monastery in eastern Slovakia that was destroyed by fire in 1248 and never rebuilt. The organ, dug from the ruins and shipped to England for the recording, is manned here by noted medieval untonable organ specialist Laszlo Meyer-Thorn, who plays the instrument's only working key, which happens to be middle C, sort of. Taverner notes that this, along with the countertenor F sharp, sets up, quote, a perfect tritonal relationship symbolic of the Holy Trinity, unquote. Each listener will have to decide whether he or she is up to 4 hours of intonations and drones in a mysterious, untranslatable language, no texts or translations are included, accompanied by a penetrating, reedy-sounding organ playing a sort of middle C. Of course, fans of Taverner will have to have this, but for the rest of us, it's worth taking a more careful approach. In the 4-disc set's liner notes, Taverner, who begs not to be confused with eminent 16th century composer John Taverner, reveals some of his thoughts and motivations for this new work, spoken through 2 of God's 3 conductors. Taverner disciples Henry Pucel and Benjamin Bitten. Quote, well, yes, of course, many of you will want to wait for the work's world premiere, unquote, Pucel says, quote, which will take place during the next major televised funeral where billions of people are watching, unquote. As for the recording, Taverner's own words, related by Bitten, are telling, quote, my past musings and meditations on substance led to the concept of essence as the finite substance, if you will, of my compositions. Now my most recent revelations have led to what I shall call etherescence, the essence of the ethereal, which is to say, my music is moving closer and closer to the defining center of God, which has no physical substance, and therefore, as I come closer to this point, my music eventually will have no physical existence, no measurable sound at all, unquote. A moment, if you will, that many of us hope we will live to experience. Okay, so that was the review, the April Fool's review. And well, what happened? we had a big problem. We almost had a legal problem. Now, as you know, we love Chandos. They're a wonderful label. They've done amazing things. And this was a project that we thought looked pretty good on their label. We got a letter from them asking where we got that recording because their Japanese distributor had called them up and wanted to order it and couldn't find it anywhere in their catalog. And they were having terrible, terrible problems. And it was causing all kinds of havoc with this Japanese distributor. And they had to try and explain to said Japanese distributor that said recording did not actually exist. And it was, oh my goodness, it was a tense moment there for a little while, because not only did the Japanese distributor have no sense of humor, but the folks at Chandos, well, they weren't exactly, at least at that point, a laugh riot either in their dealings with us, the press, especially the not English press. It was just unbelievable. Absolutely unbelievable. And so that is the third and last story that I wanted to share with you, because I just think, and links to all of these reviews and other things are down below if you want to check them out for yourself. I just think it's fascinating. Absolutely fascinating. Because even when you go to absurd lengths to tell people that this is not something to be taken seriously, they just miss the point. That's what fascinates me. It really, really fascinates me. And I think, as we're all friends here, I can take you into my confidence. And I'm sure it will fascinate you too. Anyway, keep on listening, friends. Thanks so much for joining me. Take care.